Imagine standing in your own living room while your mother reaches out and demands the keys to the house you bought with your own money. She told me to move out because my brother needed the space. The locks were already changed before I even got home. My mother is trying to erase me with a forged signature on a legal deed. If she wants a show, then I will give her one in front of a judge. My name is Stella Baker. I am 34 years old, and for the last decade I have made a living by predicting how things fall apart. As a senior risk analyst at Hawthorne and Lane Advisory in downtown Chicago, my entire existence is calibrated to identify the fracture points in corporate mergers and high-stakes equity deals. I look for the rot behind the glossy balance sheets. I find the silence where there should be noise and the noise where there should be silence. I am good at it because I do not rely on hope. I rely on data. I rely on the cold and hard certainty of a spreadsheet that balances down to the last cent. However, on this particular Friday evening, my analytical brain was turned off. The only data point I cared about was the distance between the grim concrete skyline of Chicago and the quiet suburban sanctuary of Cedar Hollow. I had spent the last 5 days drowning in a forensic audit that required 3 pots of coffee a day and 4 hours of sleep a night. My eyes felt like they were packed with sand. My lower back was a knot of tension that no amount of ergonomic seating could fix. All I wanted was the specific silence of the house I had purchased 2 years ago. I wanted to sit on the back porch of the single-story ranch house on Elm Street, listen to the wind in the oak trees, and perhaps sleep for 12 straight hours. I drove my silver sedan down Interstate 65, watching the urban sprawl give way to the flat and endless cornfields of Indiana. The drive usually took 3 hours. Today, due to a jackknife tractor trailer near Gary, it had taken 4. By the time I took the exit for Cedar Hollow, the sun was already dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. I pulled into the driveway. The house looked exactly as I needed it to look. The siding was a clean and crisp white. The lawn was mowed, thanks to the landscaping service I paid for automatically on the 1st of every month. It was the only thing I owned that felt permanent. My apartment in Chicago was a rental, a shoebox close to the office where I merely stored my clothes and slept. But this house in Cedar Hollow was mine. It was my name on the deed. It was my credit score that had bled for the mortgage. It was my safety net for my parents, Ron and Diane, who had spent a lifetime making terrible financial decisions. I grabbed my purse and my overnight bag from the passenger seat. I walked up the concrete path, the familiar cracking of autumn leaves under my boots, sounding like a welcome home song. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my key ring. I found the silver key, the one with the blue plastic cap I had put on it to distinguish it from my office keys. I slid the key into the lock. It stopped halfway. I frowned and pulled it back, wiggling it slightly. I tried again. It hit a hard metal wall inside the cylinder. It would not turn. I leaned in closer, squinting in the dim porch light. The metal around the keyhole was shiny, brighter than I remembered. There were tiny, almost microscopic shavings of brass on the floor mat. I ran my thumb over the face of the lock. It was smooth, too smooth. There were fresh scratches around the deadbolt housing, the kind made by a power drill slipping against the metal. This was a new lock. My heart did not speed up. It slowed down. That is what happens when you work in risk analysis. You do not panic when the numbers do not add up. You freeze and you assess. I knocked. It was a sharp and authoritative rap against the wood. I waited. From inside, I heard the muffled sound of a television. Then, footsteps. They were hesitant at first. Then they grew louder. The deadbolt. The new deadbolt clicked back. The door opened a few inches. My mother, Diane Baker, stood in the gap. She was wearing the floral apron I had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, stiff with hairspray. She looked at me, and for a second, I expected the usual greeting. I expected her to open the door wide and complain that I looked too thin or that I worked too hard. Instead, she blocked the entrance with her body. She smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was a tight grimace, the kind of expression a person wears when they are trying to keep a lid on a pot of boiling water. It was a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Stella," she said. Her voice was bright, too bright. "You are here?" "My key didn't work," I said. I held it up. "Mom, why didn't my key work?" She did not look at the key. She looked over my shoulder, scanning the driveway as if checking to see if I had brought an army with me. When she saw I was alone, her shoulders relaxed, but she did not move from the doorway. "We had to change it," she said. She said it casually, as if she were telling me they had changed the brand of milk they bought. "You changed the locks?" I asked. On my house without telling me. Well, you are always so busy, Diane said. She smoothed her apron. We didn't want to bother you with little details. Access to my property isn't a little detail, I said. I took a step forward. Expecting her to step back, she stayed planted. Actually, Stella, she said, and her voice dropped an octave. It lost that fake brightness. It became steel. That is what we need to talk about. You are already set up in the city. You have your apartment. You have your big career. I stared at her. What are you talking about? It doesn't make sense for you to come back and forth, she said. It is disruptive. So, you should just stay in Chicago. Ditch the commute. You will be happier. I blinked. The words were simple, but the arrangement of them was insane. Are you telling me I can't come into my own house? It is not really about that, she said. She took a breath, like she was reciting a line she had practiced in front of a mirror. Logan needs the space. I felt the air leave my lungs. Logan, my brother, the golden boy, the firstborn son who could do no wrong, even though his entire adult life was a series of spectacular failures financed by my parents' retirement fund. Logan, I repeated. He is going through a transition, Diane said. He needs stability. He needs a place where he can focus on his new venture without distractions. He needs the master bedroom. Stella. The master bedroom, I said flatly. My bedroom. You are never here, she snapped, her mask slipping. It sits empty 5 days a week. It is wasteful. Your brother is family. He needs a roof over his head. He has a roof, I said. He has his apartment in Greenwood. He gave that up, a voice said from behind her. Diane shifted slightly. And there he was, Logan Baker, 37 years old. He was wearing a fresh button-down shirt and holding a glass of water with a slice of lemon in it. He looked healthy. He looked rested. He looked like the lord of the manor surveying his peasants. He stepped out onto the porch, moving past our mother with an ease that made my stomach turn. He leaned against the doorframe, taking a sip of his water. Hey, Stell, he said. Rough drive. What are you doing here, Logan? I asked. Living, he said. He gestured vaguely behind him. Mom and Dad needed help around the place. You know how Dad's back gets. I told them. I said, I'm busy, but family comes first. So I moved in to take care of them. You moved in, I repeated. Into my house. Our house, he corrected gently. The family home. No, I said. The anger was starting to rise now, hot and sharp in my throat. Not our house. My house. I paid the down payment. I pay the mortgage every single month. I pay the property taxes. I pay for the insurance. This is my asset. Logan sighed. He looked at Diane and shook his head, a look of shared pity passing between them. See, Diane said to him. I told you she would be like this. She turned back to me, her eyes hard. You are so selfish. Stella, you always have been. You count every penny. You think money makes you the boss of us. Money bought the roof you are standing under, I said. And the agreement was that you and Dad could live here to keep your costs down, not Logan. We discussed this, explicitly. Circumstances change, Diane said. Logan is your brother. If you loved this family, you would be happy to help him get back on his feet. I have helped him get back on his feet 4 times, I said. I am done paying for his feet. We are not asking you to pay, Logan said smoothly. We are just asking you to give us some space. You have the city. You have your fancy job. Just stay there. Let us handle the home front. I am coming in, I said. Move. I stepped forward again. Diane put a hand on my chest. It was a light touch, but it was a boundary. No, she said. I looked down at her hand. Excuse me. You are not coming in to cause a scene, she said. Your father is resting. We are having a peaceful night. We are not going to let you ruin it with your drama and your spreadsheets. My drama. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. You locked me out of my own house. We packed your things, she said. She pointed to the corner of the porch, hidden behind a large potted fern. I looked. There were 3 large black garbage bags and 2 cardboard boxes. They were stacked neatly. They had not been thrown there in a hurry. They had been placed there with care. That is the stuff you left in the bathroom and the bedroom, Diane said. The rest, well, we can put it in storage for you if you send us the money for a unit, but we needed the closets clear for Logan. I stared at the bags. I could see the corner of my favorite winter coat poking out of one of the boxes. I could see the spine of a vintage finance textbook I had kept since college. They had gone through my room. They had touched my things. They had erased me. "You have got to be kidding me," I whispered. "It is for the best," Logan said. "You will see. Once you cool down, you will realize this is better for everyone. You hate the commute anyway." He took another sip of water. He looked so comfortable. He looked like he belonged there, and I was the intruder. I looked past him, into the slice of the kitchen visible through the open door. The lights were on. It looked warm. I could smell roast chicken. It was the meal Diane made for special occasions. My eyes landed on the kitchen table. It was set for 3, but there was something else on the table. It was sitting right next to the salt and pepper shakers. It was a large, manila envelope. It was thick. I recognized the return address stamp in the upper left corner, even from this distance. The bold, block lettering, the official seal, County Recorder. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October wind. Why would there be mail from the County Recorder on the table? I had not requested any documents. The deed was recorded 2 years ago. There was no reason for the county to be sending anything to this address unless a new filing had been initiated. Diane saw me looking. Her eyes darted back to the table. She saw the envelope. Panic, sharp and sudden, flared in her face. She turned around quickly, her hand abandoning its post on the doorframe. She rushed to the table. She grabbed the envelope and flipped it over, face down, slapping her hand on top of it as if she were killing a spider. She looked back at me, breathless. "Go home, Stella," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Just go home." "I am home," I said. "No," Logan said. He stepped forward and grabbed the door handle. "Not anymore." He began to close the door. "Wait," I said. "What is in that envelope?" "Nothing," Diane yelled from the kitchen. "Just junk mail." "It didn't look like junk mail," I said. "Good night, Stella," Logan said. The door slammed shut. I heard the heavy, solid thud of the deadbolt sliding home, my deadbolt, the one I had paid for, replaced by one I could not open. I stood there in the dark. The wind rustled the dry leaves around my feet. The garbage bags full of my clothes sat like accusations in the corner. My first instinct was to pound on the door, to scream, to throw a rock through the window, to call the police and demand they let me in. But then the training kicked in. Risk analysis is not about emotional reaction. It is about evidence gathering. It is about documenting the failure event so you can build a case for the insurance claim. If I called the police now, it would be a domestic dispute. It would be my word against theirs. They were inside. I was outside. Possession, as the saying went, was 9/10 of the law. And if they were willing to change the locks, they were willing to lie to a deputy. But that envelope was not a domestic dispute. That was something else. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling, but my fingers were precise. I opened the voice memo app. I hit the red record button. I brought the phone close to my lips. "Date is October 27th, I said, my voice low and steady. Time is 7:45 p.m. I have just been denied entry to my property at 42 Elm Street, Cedar Hollow. The locks have been changed without my consent. My mother, Diane Baker, and my brother, Logan Baker, are currently occupying the premises and have stated they intend to permanently displace me. There is an unopened or recently opened envelope from the county recorder on the kitchen table which my mother attempted to conceal." I paused. I looked at the closed door. I could see the shadows of them moving inside. They were probably laughing. They probably thought they had won. They thought I would drive back to Chicago, cry in my apartment, and eventually send a check for Christmas because that is what Stella does. Stella fixes things. Stella pays. I stopped the recording. I looked at the trash bags. I would not take them. Leaving them there was proof of an illegal eviction. "If this is a stage," I whispered to the empty porch, "then I'm going to make sure I keep the master tape." I turned around and walked back to my car. I did not look back. I had a lot of work to do. And none of it involved crying. To understand why I stood on that porch in Cedar Hollow and recorded a crime instead of breaking a window. You have to understand the geography of my childhood. You have to understand the specific ecosystem of the Baker family back in Maplebrook, where I learned very early on that love was a finite resource, and the distribution of it was heavily rigged. In Maplebrook, Logan was not just a child, he was an event, he was a phenomenon. My mother, Diane, liked to tell people that Logan was her miracle. He had been a difficult birth, a fighter from the very first breath, she would say, her eyes misting over with a reverence she never directed at anything else. I, on the other hand, was the easy one, I was the child who slept through the night. I was the toddler who played quietly in the corner. I was the self-sufficient one. That was the label that stuck. Self-sufficient. It sounds like a compliment. But in the mouth of a parent who plays favorites, it is an excuse. It means they do not have to worry about you. So they do not have to think about you. Our house in Maplebrook was a shrine to Logan's mediocrity. If Logan ran 5 yards in a pee-wee football game, there was a framed photo of it on the mantle by Monday. If Logan drew a stick figure that vaguely resembled a dog, it was taped to the refrigerator with magnets that looked like gold stars. My report cards, which were straight rows of perfect scores, were glanced at, signed, and placed in a drawer. Diane would pat my head and say that she expected that from me. She said it as if my hard work was a default setting, boring and inevitable, while Logan's breathing was an act of genius. The weekends were the worst. The weekends were a blur of logistics centered entirely around whatever hobby Logan had decided to pursue that month. There was baseball. There was karate. There was that brief and expensive period where he wanted to play the electric guitar. We spent hours in the minivan, driving to tournaments and recitals. I remember one specific Saturday when I was 12. It was the scorching heat of July. Logan had a baseball tournament 2 counties over. I had a fever. I remember feeling the heat radiating off my skin, my head pounding like a drum. I told my mother I felt sick. She put a hand on my forehead for 2 seconds, distracted, looking for Logan's cleats. She told me to take an aspirin and bring a book. We could not miss the game. She said, Logan needed the support. So I sat in the bleachers for 6 hours under the brutal sun, shivering despite the heat, watching my brother strike out 3 times. When he finally hit a single, my parents leaped to their feet, screaming his name as if he had just cured a disease. I sat there and focused on not vomiting. When we got home, there was always a celebration, a pizza party. A gathering of neighbors. The house would fill with people, and the noise would rise to a deafening roar. Logan would hold court in the center of the living room, recounting his athletic exploits, embellishing every detail while the adults nodded and smiled. My role in these pageants was clear. I was the crew, I was the staff. While Diane played the glowing hostess, I was the one walking around with a trash bag, collecting the red plastic cups. I was the one scraping the half-eaten slices of cake into the bin. I was the one washing the dishes because Diane did not want to ruin her manicure. Guests would sometimes notice. A neighbor, Mrs. Gable, once touched my arm while I was drying a platter and told Diane that she was lucky to have such a helpful daughter. Diane did not look at me with pride. She looked at me with relief, the way you look at a dishwasher that is working correctly. She said I was a good girl. She said I liked to help. She said it was good practice for when I had my own home. She never said I was smart. She never said I was talented. She only praised my utility. My father, Ron, was a different story. He was not cruel. He did not have the sharp, dismissive edge that Diane carried. He was a soft man, with soft eyes and a spine made of wet cardboard. He loved me, I think, in a quiet and ineffective way, but he loved peace more. There were times I would try to talk to him. I would find him in the garage, tinkering with the lawnmower, and I would try to tell him about a book I read or a math problem I solved. He would smile, and for a moment, I would feel seen. But then Diane's voice would cut through the air, calling for Ron, demanding Ron, needing Ron to fix something or find something for Logan, and every single time, the light would leave his eyes. He would shrink. He would give me a look of apologetic helplessness, pat my shoulder, and walk away. He chose the path of least resistance. He chose not to upset Diane. He taught me that being nice was useless if you did not have the courage to be fair. I found my oxygen elsewhere. I found it 3 miles away, in a small, meticulously organized house that smelled of peppermint tea and old paper. My grandmother June was my father's mother, but she shared none of his weakness. She was a woman of sharp angles and hard truths. She did not bake cookies. She did not knit sweaters. She sat at her kitchen table with a visor on her head and a ledger open in front of her. When I was 13, I started riding my bike to her house on Saturday mornings to escape the chaos of Logan's schedule. June did not turn on the television for me. She pulled out a second chair and handed me a calculator. She taught me the language of the world. She taught me that numbers were the only things that did not lie to you. People could lie. Mothers could claim they loved everyone equally while buying one child a car and the other a bus pass. But the numbers on a bank statement told the ruthless truth. June showed me her bills. She showed me her savings. She explained the concept of interest in a way that made it sound like a horror story. She explained that when you borrow money, You are selling a piece of your future time to pay for your present desire. I remember one afternoon clearly. The sunlight was cutting across the dust motes in her kitchen. She pushed a piece of paper toward me. It was a credit card statement. She pointed to the line that said, minimum payment. She asked me what that number meant. I looked at the math. I calculated the interest rate. I told her that if she only paid that amount, she would be paying for a pair of shoes for 9 years. June nodded, her face grim. She told me that debt was a shackle. She told me that financial illiteracy was a cage. She looked me dead in the eye and said something I have carried in my chest like a second heart. She told me not to sign my future away for someone else's dream. She did not give me money. June was not rich, and she was frugal to the point of pain, but she gave me a small, leather-bound notebook. She told me to write down every single dollar I received, birthday money, babysitting money, money found on the sidewalk. She taught me to categorize it, needs, wants, savings, emergency fund. I became obsessed. I loved the clean, white logic of the page. I loved the way the columns balanced. In my ledger, there was no golden child. In my ledger, a dollar was a dollar. No one got extra credit for being charming. No one got a bonus for being a boy. The math was the great equalizer. It was a place where the rules were fixed, and if you followed them, you were safe. At home, the rules were fluid. They changed based on Logan's mood or Diane's whims. As we got older, the disparity became financial. Logan wanted a car when he was 16. Diane said he needed it to get to practice, to socialize, to be a leader. They bought him a brand new red sports car. I saw the paperwork on the counter. I saw the interest rate. It made my stomach hurt. When I turned 16, I asked for help paying for a used sedan so I could get to my part-time job at the library. Diane laughed. She said a car was a luxury. She said I was smart enough to figure out the bus schedule. She said it would build character. I took the bus. I saved my money. I put it in the account June helped me open. The real poison, though, was not the money. It was the philosophy Diane tried to plant in my head. It was the subtle, insidious gardening she did in my psyche. I remember coming home with an acceptance letter to a summer program for advanced mathematics. It was prestigious. I was proud. I showed it to Diane while she was folding Logan's laundry. She glanced at it and sighed. She told me that it was nice that I was studious. But she warned me not to get too hard. She said that for a girl, the goal was stability. She said I should look for a job that was safe, something that would let me be a good wife and mother one day. Then she held up one of Logan's football jerseys. She smiled that beatific, worshipful smile. She said that Logan was different. She said Logan was a visionary. She said he was the kind of person who was going to make things happen. The kind of man who would change the world. She said we all had to make sacrifices to ensure Logan had the runway he needed to take off. I looked at her. I looked at the jersey. I looked at the acceptance letter in my hand. I realized then that she did not see me as a person. She saw me as a support beam. I was part of the infrastructure designed to hold Logan up. My purpose, in her eyes, was to be solid, boring, and silent, so that he could shine. I walked out of the laundry room. I went to my bedroom and closed the door. I took out the notebook June had given me. I looked at the column marked emergency fund. I made a vow that night. It was a quiet vow. Made without tears. Made with the cold precision of an auditor. I swore that I would never be a support beam for someone else's collapsing building. I swore that I would build my own house. I swore that one day, I would own a life that was entirely mine. I would have a door that I could lock. I would have a table where no one could tell me to clear the dishes. I would have a name on a deed that no one could erase. I would not beg for a place in this family. I would buy my own place in the world. And 20 years later, I had done exactly that. I had built it brick by brick, dollar by dollar, sacrifice by sacrifice, which is why, when I stood on that porch in Cedar Hollow and realized they were trying to steal it from me, it was not just a property dispute. It was a violation of the only religion I had ever believed in. They were trying to tell me that the math did not matter. They were trying to tell me that even now, even after I had won, I was still just the girl who was supposed to clean up the mess. The distance between Maplebrook and Chicago is only a few hours by car, but for me, it measured the span between suffocation and oxygen. I left for Midlake University with 2 suitcases and a patchwork quilt of scholarships that I had stitched together with the desperation of a drowning woman clutching at driftwood. I had applied for everything: the Rotary Club grant, the essay contest on civic duty, the memorial fund for students with high math scores. I did not care where the money came from, as long as it meant I did not have to ask my parents for a dime. I knew that if I asked for money, I would be giving Diane a lever to pull. I would be handing her the remote control to my life, so I worked. I worked in the university library shelving books in the sub-basement where the air smelled like dust and silence. I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour diner near campus, pouring coffee for truckers and insomniacs, counting my tips in the bathroom stall to see if I could afford textbooks. It was exhausting, but it was clean. The exhaustion belonged to me. The money belonged to me. By my junior year, I landed an internship at Hawthorne and Lane Advisory. It was a boutique firm, the kind with heavy oak doors and hushed carpets, where millions of dollars were moved with a keystroke. I was not the smartest intern there. There were kids from Ivy League schools who could talk about macroeconomics while sipping scotch. But I was the most terrified of failure, which made me the most careful. My supervisor, a woman named Elena, who wore suits that cost more than my tuition, noticed it. She told me once that I had the soul of an auditor. She said I did not look for the story people wanted to tell. I looked for the story the numbers were trying to hide. She said I was steady. She said I was on time. In a world of flashy projections and inflated egos, I was the person who checked the footnotes. While I was building a reputation based on the unsexy virtue of reliability, my brother was busy building a resume based on hallucinations. Logan graduated 2 years before me. His degree was in something vague, communications or marketing. I never quite remembered because he never actually used it. Instead, he pursued what Diane called opportunities. First, it was high-end sales for a medical device company. Diane told me over the phone that Logan was going to be driving a company car and making 6 figures within 6 months. He was going to take them to Hawaii. He was going to buy a boat. 6 months later, Logan had quit because the manager was, in his words, jealous of his potential. Then came the entrepreneurial phase. It started with a dropshipping business. He was going to sell luxury watches sourced from overseas. He explained it to us at Thanksgiving dinner, using words like vertical integration and supply chain disruption. Diane nodded as if he were delivering a sermon. Ron just ate his turkey, looking tired. I looked at the website Logan had built. I looked at the margins. I asked him who was handling the customer service returns when the cheap mechanisms failed. He told me I had a scarcity mindset. He told me I did not understand the digital economy. The watch business quietly evaporated, leaving a garage full of unsellable plastic inventory that Diane eventually started giving away as birthday gifts to confused relatives. Then came the sports bar idea. This was the big one. This was the sure thing. Logan had a friend who knew a guy who was selling a prime location downtown. All they needed was capital for the renovation. Logan showed me the business plan. It was 3 pages of clip art and projected profits that defied gravity. Where is the money coming from? I asked my father during one of my rare visits home. We were sitting on the back porch. The siding on the house was looking dingy. The gutters were full of leaves. Ron was drinking a beer, staring at the yard. Your mother thinks it is a good investment, he said. His voice was thin. She says we have to support his vision. Dad, I said, where is the money coming from? He took a long sip of beer. We took a line of credit against the house. I felt the blood drain from my face. Another one. You are already paying off the second mortgage from the time Logan needed to clear his credit card debt. It is an investment, Ron repeated, but he sounded like a hostage reading a ransom note. Diane says you have to risk it to get rich. She says we are betting on the jockey, not the horse. The jockey has fallen off every horse he has ever ridden, I said. Ron winced. Don't let your mother hear you talk like that. She says you are unsupportive. I went back to Chicago, but I could not shake the feeling of dread. I watched the numbers from a distance. I saw the signs of the fire before they felt the heat. The sports bar opened and closed within 18 months. It was a spectacular failure involving a liquor license violation and a lawsuit from a supplier. The money was gone. The equity in the house was gone. But the narrative remained. Diane did not call it a failure. She called it a learning experience. She said the market was tough. She said the government regulations were strangling small business owners. She never said Logan was incompetent. She never said they had set fire to $50,000 of their retirement security. I watched my father shrink. He had always been a quiet man, but he began to look transparent. He took a second job at a hardware store, stocking shelves on the weekends. He was 62 years old, lifting bags of concrete and lumber because his son needed to play businessman. When I called home, I would hear the fatigue in his voice. He sounded like a machine that was running on fumes. How are you, Dad? I would ask. Fine, honey, fine, he would say. Just tired, It is a busy season. It was always a busy season. I was making good money by then. I had been promoted to a full analyst role at Hawthorne and Lane. I had my own office. I had a savings account that was growing according to the strict schedule June had taught me. I started sending checks home. I did not just write a check to Diane. I knew better than that. If I sent cash, it would end up in Logan's pocket. It would become a new suit for his next interview, or a deposit on a lease for a luxury car he could not afford. So I paid the bills directly. I logged into their utility accounts. I paid the electricity. I paid the water. I paid the car insurance. I wanted to make sure the lights stayed on and the car stayed legal. Diane hated it. "Why do you have to be so controlling?" she asked me once when I refused to transfer $500 to her personal account for unexpected expenses. "It is insulting, Stella. You treat us like children." "I am treating you like a risk assessment," I said. "I am making sure the essentials are covered. If you need money for groceries, send me the receipt, and I will reimburse you." "You have become so cold," she said. "The city has hardened you." "The city has taught me the value of $1, I replied. I did not tell her that the only reason I was cold was that I was trying to build a firewall. I was trying to keep their drowning ship from pulling me under. The breaking point of my denial came on a rainy Tuesday in November. I had driven down to Maplebrook to drop off some winter coats I had bought for them. I let myself in with my key back when my key still worked. The house was quiet. Diane was out at her bridge club. Logan was presumably out conquering the business world or sleeping until noon. I went into the kitchen to make tea. I saw a stack of mail on the counter. It was arranged neatly. The way Diane arranged things she wanted people to see. Holiday cards. A catalog. But the recycling bin in the corner was overflowing. I don't know why I looked. Maybe it was the instinct Elena had praised. The instinct to look at the trash. Not the report. I pulled a crumpled piece of paper out of the bin. It was a letter from a collection agency. It was addressed to Ron. It demanded payment for a credit card with a balance of $12,000. I dug deeper. I found another one. A final notice for a personal loan. $7,000. I smoothed the papers out on the kitchen island. My hands were shaking. These were not the mortgages. These were unsecured debts. These were the high-interest anchors that dragged people to the bottom of the ocean. When Diane came home, I confronted her. I held up the papers. "What is this?" I asked. She didn't even flinch. She took off her raincoat and hung it up. "Oh, those. Don't worry about those. I have a system." "A system," I said. "Mom, this is final notice territory. This is court summons territory. Does Dad know about these?" "Your father worries too much," she said. "I handle the finances. Logan has a new project coming through next month. A big consulting gig. He is going to pay it all off in one lump sum." "Logan is not going to pay this off," I said, my voice rising. "Logan cannot pay for his own lunch. You are burying Dad in debt." "Stop being so dramatic," she snapped. She snatched the papers from my hand and crumpled them back up. "We are a family. We help each other. We invest in each other. You wouldn't understand. You only care about hoarding your money." I left that day feeling sick. I felt like I was watching a car crash in slow motion, and I was the only one screaming to hit the brakes. 2 weeks later, the call came. It was 3 a.m. My phone buzzed on the nightstand in my Chicago apartment. I woke up instantly, my heart hammering. No one calls at 3 a.m. with good news. I saw the name on the screen. "Dad," I answered. "Dad, is everything okay?" There was a silence on the other end. For a moment, I thought it was a pocket dial. I could hear breathing. It was ragged, heavy breathing. "Dad," I said again. "Stella," he whispered. His voice sounded broken. It sounded like he was hiding in a closet. "Stella, are you awake?" "I am awake," I said. I sat up and turned on the lamp. "What is wrong? Is it Mom? Is it a medical emergency?" "No," he said. He let out a sob, a wet and painful sound that tore through me. "Stella, I can't sleep. I haven't slept in 3 days." "Why not?" "The bank called the store," he said. "They called me at work. They said we are 3 months behind on the mortgage, the big one, the house." I closed my eyes. 3 months, Mom told me everything was handled. "She hid the letters," Ron said. "She told me she was paying it online. But she wasn't. She gave the money to Logan. He needed it for inventory. Or a license. I don't even know anymore." He started to cry. It was not the loud crying of a child. It was the silent, shaking weeping of a man who has realized he has failed at the one job he was supposed to do. "I am going to lose the house, Stella," he whispered. I am 64 years old. I have worked every day of my life, and I'm going to lose the roof over our heads. I don't know what to do. I'm so scared. I sat there in my safe, quiet apartment. I looked at the spreadsheet of my own finances that I kept on my laptop. I looked at the surplus I had built up over 5 years of eating ramen and working 80-hour weeks. I knew in that moment that I was at a crossroads. I could hang up. I could tell him that I had warned them. I could tell him that this was the consequence of 40 years of enabling a narcissist and her golden son. I could protect my own walls and let theirs fall down. But I heard his breathing. I heard the terror in the voice of the man who used to carry me on his shoulders. The man who was too weak to fight my mother but who had never been cruel to me. "Dad," I said, "breathe. You are not going to lose the house. There is no money. Stella, it is gone. All of it." "I know," I said, "but I am here, and I am good at fixing things." I did not tell him then what the cost of fixing it would be. I did not tell him that I was done patching the holes in a sinking ship. I hung up the phone and opened my laptop. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. I ran the numbers. I calculated the interest. I looked at the housing market. I realized that saving them was impossible. The Maplebrook house was a corpse, but I could save him. I just had to make sure that this time, when I signed the check, I was holding the pen, the paper, and the deed. The drive back to Maplebrook the morning after my father's desperate phone call felt less like a commute and more like a procession to a funeral. I arrived at the house I had grown up in, the house that had once been the envy of the block, and I saw it for what it truly was. It was a dying animal. The paint was peeling in long, sunburned strips. The roof had a sway to it, a subtle dip in the center that suggested the structural integrity was tired of holding on. The lawn, usually Ron's pride, was patchy and choked with crabgrass. I walked inside, and the smell hit me. It was the scent of stagnation. It smelled of old carpet, dust, and the sharp, metallic tang of anxiety. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I did not ask about their health. I asked for the shoeboxes. I asked for the filing cabinet keys. I asked for every single scrap of paper that had a dollar sign on it. For the next 14 hours, I turned the dining room table into a war room. I drank pot after pot of black coffee. My mother, Diane, hovered at the edge of the room, offering me sandwiches I did not eat, and making small, nervous comments about how the lighting was bad for my eyes. She was trying to mother me, but it was 20 years too late. I was not her daughter that night. I was a forensic accountant performing an autopsy on their financial life. The results were worse than I had feared. They had refinanced the house 4 times. Each time, they had stripped out the equity to pay for something urgent, a new roof that cost 3 times the market rate, a car for Logan, a bridge loan for one of Logan's failed businesses. The principal balance on the mortgage was now higher than the market value of the home. They were underwater. They were drowning in a sea of interest rates that were set to reset and skyrocket in 3 months. I looked at the credit card statements. They were maxed out. I looked at the retirement accounts. They were empty shells, drained by hardship withdrawals, by 4 in the morning. I sat back in the hard wooden chair and rubbed my face. The numbers were clear. There was no saving this house. To keep it would require an infusion of cash that would bleed me dry within a year, and we would still end up in the same place. It was a black hole. I waited for the sun to come up. When Ron and Diane shuffled into the kitchen, looking gray and terrified, I laid it out for them. "You have to sell," I said. "Immediately. If you sell now, before the bank forecloses, you might walk away with enough to pay the closing costs and maybe buy a used car. But the house is gone." Diane started to cry. It was a theatrical, wailing cry. She talked about the memories. She talked about the height chart on the doorframe. She talked about how Logan took his first steps in that hallway. "The bank does not care about Logan's first steps," I said, my voice flat. "The bank cares that you have not paid them in 90 days. Ron just stared at his hands. "Where will we go?" "Stella, we have bad credit. No one will rent to us." "I know," I said. "That is why I have a plan." I pulled out the second folder I had prepared. This was the solution. It was a surgical solution. It required amputation to save the patient. "I am going to buy a house," I said. "I found a property in Cedar Hollow. It is 40 minutes from here. It is a single-story ranch, 2 bedrooms, small yard, low taxes. It is near the hospital for your checkups." Diane stopped crying. She looked up, sniffing. "You are buying a house." "I am buying a house," I repeated, "and you are going to live in it." Relief washed over her face, instant and total. She clasped her hands together. "Oh, Stella, I knew it. I knew you would save us. You are such a good girl." "Listen to me," I said. I slammed my hand down on the table, silencing her. "I am not finished. This is not a gift. This is a legal arrangement." I slid a document across the table. I had drafted it myself on my laptop, using a template from the firm's legal database. "The house will be in my name," I said. "Solely in my name. You will not be on the deed. You will not be on the mortgage. You will sign this occupancy agreement. It states that you are allowed to live there as long as you pay for the utilities and keep the place maintained." Ron reached for the paper, his hands trembling. "Of course, honey, anything." "There are conditions," I said. I looked at Diane. I needed her to hear this. "Condition number 1. No one else lives there. This is a home for Ron and Diane Baker. It is not a crash pad for friends. It is not a hotel." "Well, naturally," Diane said, waving her hand. "Condition number 2, I continued. You cannot borrow against it. You cannot use the address to secure a loan. You cannot touch the equity because it is not your equity. It is mine." "We understand," Ron said. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "We just need a roof, Stella. We don't need to own it." "And condition number 3, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "If you violate any of these terms, the agreement is void, and you will have 30 days to vacate." Diane looked hurt. "You are talking like a landlord, not a daughter." "I am the landlord," I said. "And right now, I am the only thing standing between you and a homeless shelter. Do we have a deal?" They signed. Ron signed with gratitude. Diane signed with a heavy sigh, acting as if I were forcing her to sign away her firstborn rather than saving her life. The next month was a blur of logistics. I drained a significant portion of my savings for the down payment. I sat through closing meetings. I dealt with inspectors who told me the HVAC system in the Cedar Hollow house was old but functional. I arranged for the movers. The day of the move was a crisp Saturday in late October. The sky was a brilliant, hard blue. I had taken the day off work, driving down from Chicago at dawn to supervise the loading of the truck at the old house. It was physical, brutal work. I was the one taping boxes. I was the one directing the movers. I was the one making sure Ron didn't try to lift anything heavy with his bad back. Diane spent the morning directing the placement of her porcelain figurine collection. She did not lift a box. She stood in the center of the chaos, holding a cup of tea, pointing at things and saying, "Careful with that, it is an antique." We arrived at Cedar Hollow in the early afternoon. The house was modest, but it was solid. It had pale yellow siding and a small porch. It looked clean. It looked manageable. I unlocked the front door, my key working perfectly then, and ushered them in. "It is cozy," Diane said, looking around the living room. "Smaller than we are used to." "It is affordable," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead, "and it is yours to use." We spent the next 4 hours unpacking. I was exhausted. My muscles ached. I had dirt under my fingernails and plaster dust on my jeans. Around 4 o'clock, a car pulled into the driveway. It was Logan. He strolled up the walkway, wearing a pair of designer sunglasses and a crisp polo shirt that looked like it had never seen a day of labor. He was carrying a bottle of wine. "Welcome home," he shouted, stepping through the front door as if he were the one dedicating a bridge. "You are late," I said. "The truck is already gone." "Traffic was a nightmare," he said, dismissing me with a smile. He walked over to Diane and gave her a hug. "Place looks great. Mom, a fresh start." "It is a downsizing," I said. Logan ignored me. He walked into the kitchen. He ran his hand over the laminate countertops. He tapped the cabinets. He looked at the linoleum floor with a critical squint. "Cute," he said. "Little outdated. Though, if we knocked out this wall here, opened it up to the living room, maybe put in an island with a butcher block top, it would really modernize the flow." I stared at him. I was holding a box of heavy kitchenware. My arms were shaking from the effort. "There is no we," I said. "And there is no knocking out walls. This is not a renovation project. Logan, this is a place for Mom and Dad to live quietly. Just thinking about the asset value." "Stella," he said, taking a grape from the fruit bowl Diane had already set out. "You have to spend money to make money. This kitchen is holding the property back." "The property is fine," I snapped. "And since you are here now, you can help Dad assemble the bed frame." "Ah, I would love to," Logan said, checking his watch. But I actually tweaked my shoulder at the gym yesterday. Doctor said no heavy lifting. I am just here for moral support. He sat down at the my kitchen table, and opened the wine. He poured a glass for Diane and one for himself. He did not offer one to me. I walked out to the porch to get some air. I needed to scream, but I held it in. I told myself it was done. They were safe. The financial bleeding had stopped. I had control of the asset. Logan could talk all he wanted, but he had no power here. As I stood on the porch, watching the sun begin to dip, a woman from the house next door walked over. She was elderly, with gray curls and a friendly, inquisitive face. She was holding a plate of cookies. "Hello there," she called out. "I saw the moving truck. Wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood. I am Mrs. Higgins." Diane bustled out the door before I could answer. She had heard the voice. She was beaming, her earlier fatigue forgotten now that there was an audience. "Oh, how lovely," Diane said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I am Diane. This is my husband Ron inside." "Welcome, Diane," Mrs. Higgins said. "It is a quiet street. We were wondering who bought the place. It had been on the market for a bit." I stepped forward. I opened my mouth to introduce myself. I wanted to say, "I am Stella. I bought the house. My parents are my tenants." But Diane spoke first. She put an arm around my waist, squeezing me tight. But her eyes were fixed on the neighbor. "Oh, it is a blessing," Diane said, her voice dripping with false modesty. "We just decided it was time for a change. It is our new family home. We are just so thrilled to be here." "That is wonderful," Mrs. Higgins said. She looked at me. "And this is our daughter, Stella," Diane said. "She came down from the city to help us move our boxes. She is a hard worker." "Does she live here too?" Mrs. Higgins asked. "Oh, no," Diane laughed. "She has her own little life in Chicago. She is just visiting." I stood there, frozen, our new family home. Just visiting. In 2 sentences. She had rewritten the reality. She had erased the deed. She had erased the mortgage payments I would be making for the next 30 years. She had reduced me from the owner to the hired help. I looked at Diane. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Mrs. Higgins, smiling that charming social smile. She knew what she was doing. She was planting a flag. She was establishing the narrative with the neighbors before I could even unpack my toothbrush. "Cookies look delicious," Diane said, taking the plate. "You must come in and meet my son. Logan, he is inside. He has such a wonderful eye for design. He was just telling us how we might remodel the kitchen." I turned away. I walked down the driveway to my car to get the last box. My hands were gripping the keys so hard the metal bit into my palm. I should have corrected her. I should have pulled out the papers and shown Mrs. Higgins the signature line. But I didn't. I was too tired. And deep down, a part of me still wanted to believe that it didn't matter what she said to the neighbors. As long as the law was on my side, I didn't know then that the law cares about what is written down, but the world cares about the story that is told. And Diane had just started telling a story that would eventually lock me out of my own life. The theft of a house does not happen all at once. It happens in inches. It happens in the subtle rewriting of history, spoken over coffee and in passing comments to neighbors, until the truth is buried under so many layers of convenient fiction that digging it out feels like an act of aggression. For the first few months after I moved my parents into the Cedar Hollow house, I watched this erosion happen in slow motion. It started with the way my mother, Diane, framed the narrative of their arrival. In the beginning, during the first week or two, she would tell people on the phone that Stella found us a lovely place. It was factual. It was accurate. But by the 3rd month, the story had shifted. I would be in the kitchen, making myself a sandwich during a weekend visit, and I would hear her in the living room talking to her sister or a friend from the old neighborhood. "We are just so blessed to have this home," she would say. "It really is a reward. After all the sacrifices Ron and I made for the family, it feels like God finally gave us a place to rest." I would pause, the knife hovering over the bread. The role of the financier me had been edited out. The house was no longer a strategic asset purchased by their daughter to prevent homelessness. It was now a karmic reward for their sacrifices. The fact that those sacrifices were mostly financial illiteracy and enabling my brother was convenient to ignore. When I confronted her about it gently, she waved me off. "Oh, Stella, you know what I mean," she said, dusting a shelf. "It is just a figure of speech. Why do you always have to be so literal? You get that from your grandmother June. Always checking the ledger." "I check the ledger because I pay the ledger," I said. "And we appreciate it," she said. but her tone suggested she was thanking me for passing the salt, not for paying a $2,000 mortgage every month. Then there was the issue of Logan. The agreement I had made them sign was explicit. No long-term guests. Logan had his own life, or at least, the chaotic simulation of one, in a rental apartment 40 minutes away. But his presence in Cedar Hollow began to expand like a gas filling a vacuum. First, it was just a few boxes. He is between leases, Diane told me when I noticed a stack of cardboard in the garage. He just needs to store some inventory for his new e-commerce business. It will be gone in a month. Then it was the overnight stays. He came for dinner and had a glass of wine, Ron explained, looking at the floor. We didn't want him driving. Safety first. Stella. Then came the physical colonization. I came home one Friday in December to find the second bedroom, the one I used as a home office when I visited, transformed. My desk had been pushed into the corner. My ergonomic chair was draped with a leather jacket. In the center of the room, set up on a folding table, was a mixing board, a microphone, and a ring light. What is this? I asked. Logan walked in, eating a yogurt. He was wearing sweatpants and looked as if he had just woken up, despite it being 2 p.m. Do you like it? He asked. It is the studio. I am starting a podcast about cryptocurrency and mindset. The Baker mindset. Catchy, right? This is my office, I said. I have my files here. I move them, he said, gesturing to the closet. You are only here like 2 days a month. Stella, it is wasted square footage. I am maximizing the utility of the asset. That is what you are always talking about. Right efficiency. You are not living here, Logan, I said. That is the rule. I am not living here, he said, opening his eyes wide in mock innocence. I am working here. I sleep on the couch sometimes when we record late. Mom likes having me around. She gets lonely when Dad is at the hardware store, and you are off in the big city being important. He always did that. He weaponized my success against me. He made my job, the very thing that kept the lights on. Sound like an act of abandonment. The real warning shot, however, came in the mail. I had a system. I had instructed the post office to forward all bills to my Chicago address, but the generic house mail still went to Cedar Hollow. Usually, I sorted through it when I visited. I was flipping through a stack of flyers and coupons when I saw it. An envelope from the Homeowners Association. It was official correspondence. It was addressed to Mr. Logan Baker. I felt a cold spike in my chest. I ripped it open. It was a standard notice about trash can placement. Nothing serious, but the addressee was the problem. The HOA only sent correspondence to the owner of record or the registered primary resident. I walked into the kitchen where Diane was chopping vegetables. Why is the HOA writing to Logan? I asked, holding up the letter. Diane didn't look up. Oh, that. The nice man from the association came by a few weeks ago to update the directory. Logan was in the driveway washing his car. They just started chatting. And I guess the man assumed Logan was the man of the house, she said. She laughed, a nervous, twittering sound. You know how people are, old-fashioned. They see a young man and they assume. Did Logan correct him? I asked. Did you correct him? It didn't seem worth a fuss, she said. It is just a newsletter. Stella. Does it matter whose name is on the envelope as long as we get the news? Yes, it matters, I said, my voice rising. It establishes residency. If Logan is listed as the resident with the HOA, he can use that to claim tenancy rights. We talked about this. No paper trail for Logan. Diane slammed the knife down. She turned to me, her face flushed with sudden anger. You are obsessed, she shouted. You are obsessed with rules and rights and paper trails. You don't understand family. Stella, you don't understand how it looks. People ask questions. Where is your daughter? Why does the son not live there? We just wanted to make it look normal. Why do you have to punish us for trying to have a normal life? I am not punishing you, I said. I am protecting you, and I am protecting my investment. Your investment, she spat the word out. That is all we are to you, a line on a spreadsheet. If I treated you like a spreadsheet, I would have evicted you for insolvency 3 months ago. I said. She gasped. She put a hand to her chest. Then she started to cry. It was her trump card. The conversation was over. For the next few weeks, the atmosphere in the house was poisonous. I felt it the moment I walked in the door. The silence was heavy. Conversation stopped when I entered the room. Logan began to drop hints that he was the one holding the family together. Dad was coughing a lot last night. He told me one Saturday, leaning against the counter while I did the dishes because apparently, owning the house also meant I was the maid. I made him some tea with honey. You wouldn't know. Of course, you were in Chicago. I was working. Logan, I said, to pay for the heat that keeps the house warm. Yeah, he said. Money is great, Stell, but presence. Presence is love. I am here. I am the one driving Mom to the grocery store. I am the one fixing the leaky faucet. You fixed the faucet? I asked, surprised. Well, I called a guy, he said, but I managed the project. I went to put my clothes away in the closet of the master bedroom. I had kept a small section in my parents' room for my winter coats, since Logan had annexed the guest room. I opened the door. My coats were gone. In their place hung a row of Logan's suits and a collection of his crisp, dry-cleaned shirts. I stared at the hangers. I felt a strange sense of vertigo, as if the floor were tilting under my feet. I found my coats in the basement. They were stuffed into a garbage bag, tossed on top of a pile of old holiday decorations. They smelled of mildew. I carried the bag upstairs. Why are my clothes in the basement? Logan needed the closet space, Diane said. She was watching television and didn't turn around. His shirts get wrinkled if they are boxed up. Your coats are heavy. They can take a little rough handling. I am the owner of this house, I said, and I have been relegated to a garbage bag in the basement. You are barely here, Diane snapped. Stop being so territorial. You are acting like a child who doesn't want to share her toys. This isn't a toy, I said. It is a $300,000 asset. There you go again with the numbers, she said. I realized then that I was losing. I was winning the argument on logic, but I was losing the war for reality. In their minds, I was the distant, cold bank manager, and Logan was the warm, present, rightful heir to the kingdom. Then came the whisper of the party. I saw a notification on my mother's iPad, which she had left on the coffee table. It was a group message from her bridge club. Can't wait for the housewarming, one message read. Is it still the 28th? I froze. The 28th was next Saturday. No one had mentioned a party to me. I unlocked the iPad. Her passcode was still 1034, despite my constant lectures on security. I opened the Facebook app. There was a draft post she had been writing. It was a photo of the house, looking warm and inviting in the evening light. The caption read, "So incredibly proud of our new beginning. It has been a hard road, but faith and family got us through. Thank you to my wonderful son Logan for working so hard to get us settled and making this house a home. We are finally where we belong." I read it twice. There was no mention of me, no mention of Stella, no mention of the daughter who drained her savings, who argued with underwriters, who spent nights calculating debt-to-income ratios. I was not just being pushed out of the house, I was being written out of the history. I put the iPad down. I felt a cold clarity settling over me. This was not accidental. This was a coup. I drove back to Chicago that night in a daze. I needed distance. I needed to think. I was halfway home, driving through the darkness of the interstate, when my phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a distinct vibration pattern. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a call. It was an alert from my credit monitoring service. I ignored it until I got to my apartment. I walked in, threw my keys on the counter, and picked up the phone. I opened the app. A red banner was flashing across the top of the screen. New inquiry detected. I clicked on it. Type mortgage. Home equity. Line of credit. Lender First National Bank of Indiana. Bureau TransUnion. Date today. Associated address 42 Elm Street, Cedar Hollow. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. A home equity line of credit. A HELOC. You cannot apply for a HELOC on a house you do not own. You need the deed. You need to be the title holder, unless someone was pretending to be the title holder. Unless someone had walked into a bank, or logged onto a website, and claimed that they were Stella Baker, or that they had power of attorney, or that the house had been transferred. My mother had told the neighbors it was their house. She had told the HOA it was Logan's house. Now, it seemed, they were trying to tell the bank the same thing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The time for being the hurt daughter was over. The risk analyst was back in charge. I took a screenshot of the alert. I opened my laptop. I started a new folder titled Evidence. If they wanted to treat my house like their personal piggy bank, they were about to find out that this piggy bank was made of reinforced steel, and I was the one holding the hammer. The red notification on my phone screen was not just a digital alert, it was a smoking gun. A credit inquiry for a home equity line of credit requires authorization. It requires a signature. It requires someone to look a banker in the eye and say, "I own this property, and I would like to borrow against its value." I did not wait. I dialed my mother's number. My hand was gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Hello?" Diane's voice was light, airy. The voice of a woman who had not just attempted grand larceny. "Why is First National Bank running a credit check on my house?" I asked. I did not say hello. I did not ask how she was. I launched the missile. There was a pause, a long, a heavy silence that told me everything I needed to know. "I don't know what you are talking about," she said. But the airy tone was gone. Her voice had tightened. "I have a fraud alert." "Mom," I said. "It popped up 5 minutes ago. Someone applied for a $50,000 line of credit using the Cedar Hollow address. That is my asset. That is my equity. Did you try to mortgage my house?" "Stop it," she snapped. "Stop using those words. Asset, equity. You sound like a machine. Did you sign my name?" I asked. "Logan was just asking," she shouted. The explosion was sudden and defensive. "He just wanted to see what the possibilities were. He has a business idea. A real one this time. And he just went to the bank to ask some questions. He didn't mean any harm." "He cannot ask questions about my equity," I said. "That is attempted fraud, and for him to even ask, he would have had to present himself as the owner." "You are always spying on us," Diane screamed. "You watch us like a hawk. You track the mail. You track the bills. Now you are tracking who we talk to. It is sick, Stella. It is abusive. You are suffocating this family." "I am coming down," I said. "No," she said. "Do not come down here. We are tired. We don't want to fight." "I am coming down," I repeated. "And I am bringing the deed." I hung up. I did not pack a bag. I grabbed my keys and walked out of my apartment. The drive that night was a blur of interstate lights and cold fury. I did not listen to the radio. I listened to the replay of the last 5 years in my head. Every check I had written, every excuse I had swallowed, every time I had let them erode my boundaries because I wanted to believe that they loved me, not just my utility. When I pulled into the driveway at Cedar Hollow, the house was blazing with light. It looked festive. It looked welcoming. It looked like a lie. I marched up the walkway. I took out my key. I shoved it into the lock. It stopped. It hit that hard, unyielding wall of metal. I stood there for a second, the realization washing over me like ice water. They hadn't just changed the locks to keep me out. They had changed the locks because I had caught them. They were circling the wagons. I pounded on the door. It opened. But only the length of the chain. Diane's face appeared in the crack. She didn't look like my mother. She looked like a gatekeeper. "I told you not to come," she said. "Open the door," I said. "My key doesn't work." "We had to change it," she said. Her voice was steady now, rehearsed. "We didn't feel safe. You were sounding so erratic on the phone, so angry." "You feel unsafe because I asked why you were stealing from me," I asked. "Open the door, Diane, or I am calling the police." She hesitated. Then, she undid the chain and opened the door. I stepped inside. The living room was different. My favorite armchair was gone. The rug I had bought in Turkey was gone. In their place was a sleek, modern leather sofa that I had never seen before. A large flat-screen TV was mounted on the wall where my bookshelf used to be. Logan was sitting on the new sofa. He didn't stand up. He was scrolling through his phone, looking bored. "Hey, Stell," he said. "You made good time." "Where is my furniture?" I asked. "Storage," Logan said. "Didn't fit the vibe. We are going for a more open concept." I turned to Diane. "I want the new key, now." Diane crossed her arms. She was standing in the middle of the room, planting her feet wide. She was drawing a line in the sand. "No," she said. The word hung in the air. "Excuse me." "You are not getting a key," Diane said. "We have discussed it. Your father and I, and Logan, we had a family meeting." "I am the family," I said, "and I am the landlord." "You are an absentee landlord," Logan piped up, "and a hostile one." "Stella," Diane said, her voice taking on that reasonable, condescending tone she used when she was gaslighting me. "Look at you. You are shaking. You are stressed. The city is destroying you. You come here and you bring all this negative energy. You wave papers around. You talk about fraud. It is toxic." "I am talking about the law," I said. "We think it is best if you just stay in Chicago," Diane said. "You have your apartment. You have your job. You don't need this place." Logan needs this place. This is my house, I said, spacing out the words. I bought it, I paid for it, and you hold it over our heads every single day, Diane shouted. You use it to control us. Well, we are done being controlled. Logan is going to take over the management of the house. He is going to live here. He is going to take care of us. With what money? I asked. The money he steals from the equity. He has prospects, Diane screamed. He has a vision. He is going to buy the house from you eventually. He just needs a runway. He needs a fresh start. Why can't you give him that? Why are you so greedy? It is not greedy to want to keep what I earned, I said. You have enough, she said. You have everything. You always have. You get the good grades. You get the good job. You get the money. Logan has had bad luck. He deserves a win. If you were a good sister, you would step aside and let him have this. I am not stepping aside, I said. I am evicting you, all of you. If you don't give me the key, I will file the papers on Monday. Diane laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Go ahead, she said. Take your own parents to court. See how that looks. Tell the world you threw your sick father and your mother out on the street because you wanted to hoard a house you don't even live in. I looked at my father. Ron was sitting at the kitchen table, hunching over a mug of tea. He hadn't said a word. He looked small. He looked defeated. Dad, I said, are you hearing this? He looked up. His eyes were wet. He looked at me. Then he looked at Diane. He saw the rage in her face. He saw the way she was standing. He looked back down at his tea. Please, Stella, he whispered. Just don't make it harder. That was the knife. That was the moment it truly broke. He wasn't just weak. He was complicit. He would watch me bleed to keep her quiet. Get out, Diane said. She pointed to the door. Get out of our house. You don't belong here, Logan added, not looking up from his phone. You don't fit the aesthetic. I looked at them. The mother who saw me as a wallet, the brother who saw me as an obstacle, the father who didn't see me at all. I reached into my purse. I pulled out my phone. I held it up. I am leaving, I said. My voice was deadly calm. But I am not going away. You want to play house, fine. Play house. But remember this moment. Remember that you chose to steal from the one person who was trying to save you. Drama queen, Logan muttered. I turned around and walked out. I did not slam the door. I closed it firmly. Hearing the click of the latch, I heard the deadbolt slide home immediately. I walked to my car. The night air was freezing. My breath came in white puffs. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment. I didn't cry. The tears were gone. They had been replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a plaintiff. I drove away. I didn't look back at the house. About 40 minutes later, I pulled into a gas station rest stop off the interstate. I needed coffee. I needed to stop shaking. I sat in the car, sipping the bitter gas station brew, and opened my phone. I needed to check the credit monitoring app again to make sure no other inquiries had come through, but my thumb hovered over the Facebook icon. I opened it. The algorithm knew. The first post on my feed was from Logan Baker. It was a photo taken about an hour ago. It showed Logan standing in front of my house. He was holding a bottle of champagne. Diane was standing next to him, beaming, holding a sold sign that they must have kept from the closing or bought at a hardware store as a prop. The caption read, "So proud to finally make this happen. Closed on the dream home for my parents today. It has been a grind, but seeing the look on their faces makes every hustle worth it. Homeowner blessed family, first grind set." I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. He wasn't just living there. He was claiming the purchase. He was publicly taking credit for the years of my life I had poured into those four walls. I scrolled down to the comments. There were dozens of them. Friends from high school, relatives, people who didn't know he was unemployed. Way to go. Logan. Such a good son. Amazing accomplishment. And then I saw a comment from Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor. "It is lovely to have you in the neighborhood. Logan, you are such a sweet boy. Did your sister Stella help out at all?" My heart stopped. I waited to see the reply. It was from Diane Baker. "Oh, you know Stella. She is always so busy with her career in the city. She helped move a few boxes. But this was really Logan's project. She doesn't have much time for us these days. We are just glad Logan stepped up." I lowered the phone. The gas station lights buzzed overhead. A semi-truck rumbled past on the highway. They had done it. They had successfully completed the hostile takeover, they had the keys, they had the furniture, and now, they had the public narrative. In the court of public opinion, I was the distant, uncaring career woman, and Logan was the hero. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had forgotten that the court of public opinion does not issue subpoenas. I took a screenshot of the post. I took a screenshot of the comments. I saved them to the cloud folder. I put the car in gear and pulled back onto the highway. The road to Chicago was long and dark, but I finally knew where I was going. They wanted to push me out of the house. They wanted to erase my name. Fine, I would drag the truth back into that house, and I would do it in front of a judge who knew the difference between a hashtag and a deed. Monday morning found me not at my desk at Hawthorne and Lane, but in the plush, intimidating conference room of Miller and Sloan Legal. I had called in sick for the first time in 5 years. I was not sick in the physical sense, but my life was currently suffering from a malignant infection that required immediate surgical intervention. I sat across from Elias Miller, a real estate attorney who looked like he had been carved out of granite and dressed in a $3,000 suit. On the mahogany table between us lay the autopsy of my financial generosity. I had laid it all out. The original deed, the mortgage statements for the last 24 months, every single one paid from my personal checking account, the occupancy agreement signed by my parents, the screenshots of the credit inquiry, the screenshots of Logan's Facebook post claiming ownership. Miller picked up the occupancy agreement. He adjusted his glasses. He read it in silence for a long time. The only sound in the room was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. "This is a solid document," Miller said finally. "Restrictive, clear. They are tenants at will. You have every right to evict." "I know I can evict," I said, "but the locks are changed. They are claiming ownership publicly. And there was a credit inquiry for a home equity line that suggests they believe they have the legal standing to borrow against the house." Miller looked up. His eyes were sharp, gray, and devoid of sympathy. "Have you ever signed a power of attorney A durable POA?" I frowned. "No, never. I handle my own affairs." "Think carefully." "Stella," Miller said, "it does not have to be a big formal ceremony. It could have been slipped into a stack of other papers, a medical proxy, a joint insurance policy." I closed my eyes. I replayed the last 2 years. I sifted through the memories of quick visits, of papers shoved across kitchen tables amidst the chaos of family dinners. Then, I saw it. It was last July. I had been visiting for my father's birthday. The mood had been surprisingly light. Diane had made a cake. As I was packing to leave, she had handed me a clipboard, just the car insurance bundle. "Honey," she had said, "the agent found a way to save us $40 a month if we link the policies since your car is registered here sometimes. Just sign the bottom. I already filled out the rest." I had been in a rush. I had glanced at the header. It had said, "Authorization and consent." It looked like standard insurance boilerplate. I had signed it. I had trusted my mother because, despite everything, she was my mother. "Last July," I whispered. "She said it was for car insurance." Miller nodded grimly. "That is the oldest trick in the book. If that was a broad power of attorney, they could legally act on your behalf regarding real estate transactions. They could sign a deed transferring the house to themselves. They could sign for a loan. Can I revoke it?" "Immediately," Miller said. "But we need to know if they have used it yet. You need to go to the county recorder. And you need to see what paper they are holding that makes them think they can call the police on you." I left the office with a revocation of power of attorney drafted and notarized. I felt lighter, but also colder. The betrayal was no longer emotional. It was administrative. It was premeditated. I drove back to Cedar Hollow. It was a Tuesday. I knew the rhythm of the house. Diane would be home watching her morning talk shows. Logan would be sleeping off whatever networking he had done the night before. Ron would be at the hardware store. I walked up to the door. I did not knock. I rang the doorbell long and hard. Diane answered. She was wearing a bathrobe. When she saw me, her face hardened, but she did not slam the door. The daylight made everything feel less volatile, more transactional. "I am not in the mood, Stella," she said. "I am not here to fight," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am here to see the paperwork." "What paperwork?" "The paperwork that makes you think you can change my locks," I said. "The bank called me, Mom. They said there is a document." I lied. The bank had not called me, but in risk analysis, sometimes you have to bluff to get the other party to show their hand. Diane hesitated. She looked over her shoulder, then she smirked. It was a smug, victorious little look. "Fine," she said. "You want to see? I will show you." Then maybe you will leave us alone. She disappeared into the house. She left the door open. I stepped into the entryway, but no further. I would not give them the satisfaction of accusing me of trespassing. She came back a moment later holding a single sheet of paper. She thrust it at me. "Read it and weep," she said. I took the paper. It was a lease agreement. A standard. Internet downloaded template. Landlord Stella Baker. Tenant Logan Baker. Term 2 years. Rent $0.00. I scanned down to the bottom. There was a signature above my printed name. It was my name, but it was not my signature. The S was too looped. The T's were not crossed with the sharp, horizontal slash I had used since high school. It was a clumsy, shaky imitation. It looked like the signature of someone who had seen my writing once and tried to draw it from memory. "I didn't sign this," I said. "Yes, you did," a voice said from the stairs. Logan was coming down. He was wearing boxer shorts and a t-shirt. He looked disheveled and arrogant. "You signed it at Christmas," Logan said, yawning. "We were having eggnog. You said, 'Logan, I want you to feel secure.' You signed it right on the coffee table. You probably just forgot. You were drinking a lot of wine that night." I looked at him. I had not drunk wine at Christmas. I had been the designated driver because I had driven Ron to the emergency room for his blood pressure. "I was sober," I said. "And I did not sign this. This is a forgery." "It is a legal document," Diane said, snatching it back from my hand. "And it gives him possession for 2 years. So you can't kick him out, and since he is the tenant, he has rights. He can change the locks." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my face to remain a mask of stone. If I screamed, they won. If I called them liars, they would just shout louder. "Can I take a picture of it?" I asked. "For my records." Diane clutched it to her chest. "Why?" "Because if I signed it, I should have a copy." I said, "That is only fair, right?" She looked at Logan. He shrugged. "Let her have it, Mom." It proved she agreed. Diane held it up. She did not let go of it. I pulled out my phone. I took 3 high-resolution photos. I focused on the signature. I focused on the date. I focused on the notary stamp. Wait, there was no notary stamp. It was just a witness signature. Witness Diane Baker, of course. "Thank you," I said. "That is all I needed." I turned to leave. "That is it?" Diane asked. She sounded disappointed. She had wanted a fight. She had wanted me to cry and beg. My calm was robbing her of her drama. "You are just going to walk away." "I have seen what I needed to see," I said. I walked back to my car. As I pulled away, I saw Diane standing in the doorway, looking confused. She did not know that she had just handed me the evidence of a felony. I did not go back to Chicago. I drove straight to the county seat, a small town 10 miles away. I walked into the county recorder's office. It was a quiet room filled with rows of filing cabinets and a few computer terminals. I gave the clerk my name and the parcel number for the Cedar Hollow house. "I need to see if there have been any recent filings," I said, "or any pending activity." The clerk, a woman with reading glasses on a chain, tapped away at her keyboard. She frowned. "Well," she said, "there is nothing recorded yet, but there is a suspense item." "A suspense item?" "Yes," she said. "An electronic recording attempt came in 3 days ago, a quitclaim deed, transferring the property from Stella Baker to Logan Baker." The room spun. A quitclaim deed. They weren't just trying to lease it, they were trying to take the title. "Why is it in suspense?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow. "The notary seal was blurry," the clerk said, "and the signature verification software flagged it. It didn't match the signature on your original mortgage deed. We sent a rejection notice to the filer asking for a wet ink original to be brought in for verification." "Who was the filer?" "It was submitted through a third-party portal," she said. "But the return email is letmeseelbakerstrategies@gmail.com. "Logan, can I stop it?" I asked. "I am Stella Baker. I did not authorize that transfer." "You need to file an affidavit of identity theft," she said, "and you should probably alert your title insurance company. If that deed gets recorded, it is a mess to undo." I spent the next hour filing paperwork. I felt like I was fortifying a castle while the enemy was already inside the walls. When I walked out of the government building, my phone buzzed. It was an email. It was from my title insurance provider. Subject urgent. Fraud alert. Detected for 42. Elm Street. Dear Ms. Baker, our automated systems have detected a conflicting filing attempt on your property. Additionally, We have received an inquiry from a lender regarding a home equity line. Please contact us immediately. I sat on a bench outside the courthouse. The autumn wind was stripping the leaves from the trees. They had tried to steal the house, not metaphorically, literally. Logan had forged a deed, probably used the fake lease as supporting documentation, and tried to slip it past the county clerk. And when that stalled, he tried to get a loan. But there was one thing I couldn't figure out. The rejection notice from the county. The clerk said they sent it 3 days ago, and the fraud alert from the title company they usually send a physical letter too. Why hadn't I seen the letters? I checked the mail at the house when I was there. I had seen the junk mail. Then I remembered the day I found the locks changed. The envelope on the table, the one Diane had slapped her hand over. County recorder. She had hidden it, and the HOA letter addressed to Logan. They were intercepting the mail. They were curating what I saw so I wouldn't know the house was being stolen out from under me. I needed proof. The court would need more than my suspicion. They would need to see the act. I drove to an electronics store. I bought a high-end trail camera, the kind hunters use. It was motion-activated, battery-operated, and had cellular data capability. It could send video clips directly to my phone. I waited until nightfall. I parked my car 2 streets over and walked to the house through the backyards. I knew the neighbors' schedules. I knew the blind spots. I crept up to the edge of the property. The house was dark. They were asleep. There was a large oak tree directly across from the mailbox at the end of the driveway. It was on the easement, technically public property, but hidden by the overgrown hedge of the neighbor's yard. I strapped the camera high up in the branches, angling it perfectly at the mailbox. I camouflaged it with some dead leaves. I slipped away unseen. For 2 days, I watched my phone. I saw the mailman deliver the mail. I saw the neighbor walking her dog. Then, on Thursday afternoon, I got the notification. Motion detected. I opened the video feed. A silver sports car pulled into the driveway. It was Logan. He didn't pull all the way in. He stopped right next to the mailbox. He rolled down his window. He reached out and grabbed the stack of mail. He sat there in the car for a moment. I watched on the small screen. Zooming in. He was sorting through it. He tossed a flyer into the passenger seat. Then he held up a white envelope. I could see the red lettering on it. It looked like a final notice or a bank alert. He did not put it in the pile to take inside. He ripped it open. He read it. Then, he crumpled it up into a ball. He looked around to make sure no one was watching. He looked right at the oak tree, but he didn't see the camera. He shoved the crumpled paper into the side pocket of his car door. Then he drove up the driveway, whistling. I saved the video. I backed it up to 3 different hard drives. I sat back in my chair in my Chicago apartment. The glow of the screen illuminated my face. This was no longer a family dispute. This was federal mail theft. This was forgery. This was wire fraud. They thought they were fighting a sister who would eventually get tired and go away. They thought they were fighting a daughter who could be guilt-tripped into submission. They were wrong. They were fighting a risk analyst who had just finished gathering the data, and the data said it was time to liquidate the asset. I picked up my phone and called Miller. I have the proof, I said. I have the forgery, I have the mail theft on video, and I have the timeline. Good, Miller said. What do you want to do? We can file for an emergency eviction order. No, I said. That is too small. I want to file a civil suit for fraud, and I want to subpoena my brother for the equity application. That will destroy him, Miller warned. Once this enters the legal system, there is no going back to Thanksgiving dinner. I stopped being hungry for their table a long time ago, I said. File it. The first move in a game of high-stakes chess is rarely a scream. It is a piece of paper, folded into an envelope, delivered by a stranger who does not care about your family history. I did not go back to the house to scream at Diane. I did not text Logan to engage in a war of insults. Instead, I hired a process server named Mike, a man the size of a vending machine with a face made of stone. He drove to Cedar Hollow on a Wednesday morning. He walked past the freshly mowed lawn, ignored the welcome mat my mother had deceptively placed, and handed Diane a thick manila envelope. It was a notice to quit. The language was dry, brutal, and legally binding. It cited the specific clauses of the occupancy agreement they had violated: unauthorized residence, attempted alienation of title, failure to maintain the property in good faith. It gave them 30 days to vacate the premises. The reaction was immediate, but it did not come to me directly. It came through the grapevine of the extended family, a network my mother had cultivated like a poisonous garden for decades. My Aunt Sarah, a woman I had not spoken to since Christmas, called me at work. Stella, she said, her voice dripping with that specific kind of judgment that masks itself as concern. Your mother is hysterical. She says you are throwing them out on the street because you are jealous of your brother. I am evicting them because they tried to steal the deed to my house. Sarah, I said, typing on my keyboard while I spoke. Steal? Sarah scoffed. Oh, Stella. Always so dramatic. It was a misunderstanding. Diane said Logan just wanted to secure the property for the family legacy, and now you are sending police to their door. It was a process server, not the police, I said. And forgery is not a misunderstanding, it is a felony. You are breaking her heart, Sarah said. After all they did for you, raising you, loving you, you have the money. Stella. Why do you have to be so cruel? I hung up. I did not block her. I just put the phone down. I knew this was part of the strategy. Diane was rallying the troops. She was painting a mural of martyrdom where she was the saintly mother, and I was the cold, corporate daughter who had forgotten where she came from. Then came Logan's countermove. He took to social media. He posted a video on his Instagram and TikTok. He was sitting in my living room, the late afternoon sun casting a sympathetic glow on his face. He looked tired. He looked beaten down. Hey guys, he said into the camera, his voice cracking just enough to be believable to strangers. I don't usually do this. I try to keep things positive, but man, it is hard when the people you love turn on you. My sister is trying to kick my parents out of their home, the home I have been working so hard to fix up for them. It is about money for her. It is always about money. We are just trying to be a family, and she is sending eviction notices. He wiped a tear from his eye. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. I watched the video in my office with Elias Miller, my lawyer. Do you want to respond? Miller asked. We can issue a statement correcting the record. No, I said. Never interrupt an enemy when he is making a mistake. He just admitted in a public video that I am the one sending the eviction notice. He just publicly acknowledged my authority over the property. Miller smiled. You are learning. I am not learning, I said. I am analyzing. Now, tell me about the notary. Miller opened a file. This was the weapon we had been forging while Logan was busy crying for likes on the internet. When we had looked at the rejected quitclaim deed and the fake lease, we had focused on the signature. But Miller had dug deeper. He had looked at the notary stamp on a previous document Logan had tried to use, a gift letter that had never been filed but was found in the digital trash of the recording attempt. The notary is a woman named Linda Morsky, Miller said. I know her, I said. She is in my mother's bridge club. She makes terrible potato salad. She is also a licensed notary, Miller said. But here's the thing. A notary is required by state law to keep a journal, a log of every single document they stamp. They have to record the date, the type of document, and the form of identification presented by the signer. And we sent an investigator to speak with Ms. Morsky. Miller said, we reminded her that notarizing a forged signature is a crime that can cost her her commission and result in jail time. We asked to see her logbook for the date on the deed. Let me guess, I said. There is no entry. There is no entry, Miller confirmed. She crumbled. Stella? She admitted that Diane brought the papers to her house over coffee. Diane told her you had already signed them and just needed the stamp to expedite things because you were busy in Chicago. Linda stamped it as a favor to a friend. She never saw you. She never checked your ID. So the documents are void, I said. They are worse than void, Miller said. They are evidence of conspiracy. Your mother solicited the fraud. She didn't just know about it. She facilitated it. I felt a heavy, dull ache in my chest. It wasn't surprise. It was just the finality of it. My mother hadn't just looked the other way. She had actively recruited her friends to help rob me. File the complaint against the notary, I said. And send a formal notice to the credit bureaus. I want my credit locked down so tight that I can't even buy a pack of gum without a fingerprint scan. If Logan tries to use my name to buy so much as a toaster, I want alarms to ring in 3 different states. The pressure began to mount. The walls of the Cedar Hollow house were closing in on them, not because of physical force, but because of the invisible, crushing weight of bureaucracy. The eviction notice was ticking. The notary was panicked and calling Diane, screaming about losing her license. The credit freeze meant Logan's attempts to secure quick cash using the house equity were dead in the water, and inside the house, the cracks began to show. I received a text from my father on a Friday afternoon. I will be at the hardware store until 6. Come by. It was the first time he had reached out to me directly since the locks were changed. I drove down. I didn't go to the house. I went to the small, dusty hardware store on Main Street where Ron worked the register. He was standing behind the counter, counting change. He looked 10 years older than he had a month ago. His skin was gray, hanging loosely on his frame. His hands shook as he put pennies into the roll. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He signaled to his manager that he was taking his break. We walked out to the loading dock in the back. It was cold. We stood among the pallets of mulch and stacks of lumber. "Diane is furious," Ron said. He didn't look at me. He looked at his work boots. "She says you are trying to destroy the family reputation." "I am trying to save my financial future." "Dad," I said, "there is a difference." "She told Linda to lie," Ron said. His voice was a whisper. "I heard her on the phone, when Linda called, crying. Diane told her to stick to the story. She told her to say you were there." "I know," I said. "We have the logbook. Dad, Linda already confessed." Ron winced. He leaned against a pallet of bricks. "I tried to tell her. Stella, last night, I said, 'Diane, enough. The girl has the papers. We are in the wrong.' I told her we should just pack up and find a rental. I told her we should apologize." "And what did she say?" "She screamed at me." Ron said, "She told me I was a weak man. She said I never believed in Logan. She said—" He choked back a sob. "She said if I didn't support her on this, I could leave too. She said Logan was the only man in the house who had any spine." I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. My father had worked himself into the ground for 40 years to pay for her lifestyle, to pay for Logan's mistakes, and she was discarding him like a used wrapper because he dared to speak the truth once. "Come with me," I said. "Pack a bag. Dad, you can stay at my place in Chicago. We will figure it out." He shook his head. "I can't leave her. Stella, she doesn't know what she is doing. She is sick with it. This need to make him a hero." He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick, folded sheaf of papers. They were worn, as if he had been carrying them around for days, taking them out and reading them, then hiding them again. "I found these," he said, "in Logan's room, under his mattress." I took the papers. The first one was a credit card statement, a platinum card. The limit was $20,000. The balance was $19,800. The name on the card was Ronald Baker. I looked at the transactions: online gambling sites, liquor stores, electronics, a trip to Las Vegas 2 years ago. "I never opened this card," Ron whispered. "I have never been to Las Vegas." I flipped to the next page, another card, this one in the name of Diane Baker, maxed out, and then the emails. Printed out hard copies of emails between Logan and a debt consolidation company. My parents are old. One email from Logan read, "They don't check their credit reports. I can authorize the transfer of the balance to their joint account. Just send the paperwork to this email, not the house address." I felt sick. This wasn't just about the house. This was identity theft. This was elder abuse. Logan had been using their names, their social security numbers, to fund his life for years. He was bleeding them dry from the inside out. "Does Mom know?" I asked. Ron looked at me, and his eyes were full of a terrible, haunted knowledge. "I showed her," he said. "This morning. Before I came to work, I put them on the table. I said, 'Diane, look at this. He is stealing from us. He is the reason we have no retirement.'" And she looked at them, Ron said. She stared at them for a long time, and then she swept them off the table. She said, "He had to do what he had to do. He was building his business. He will pay us back when he hits it big." She said I gave him permission. "Did you?" "No," Ron cried. "Never. But she is rewriting it in her head. Stella, she is convincing herself that we agreed to this, just so she doesn't have to face the fact that her golden boy is a criminal." I held the papers. They felt heavy, like lead. I finally understood the architecture of the tragedy. It wasn't just that Diane loved Logan more, it was that she had invested so much of her own identity, her own ego, into the idea of his success that she could not allow him to fail. If Logan was a thief, then she was a fool. If Logan was a failure, then her entire life's work of pampering him was a waste. She would rather destroy me, destroy her husband, and destroy herself than admit that Logan was flawed. She was not just an enabler, she was an accomplice. She was a co-conspirator in the destruction of our family to build a shrine to a false god. "Keep the papers," Ron said. "I can't have them in the house. She will burn them." "I will keep them," I said. "And Dad? I am going to use them." "I know," he said. He looked at me with a resignation that broke my heart. "Do what you have to do. Stella, Someone has to stop him. I am too tired. He turned and walked back into the dark warehouse of the hardware store. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time. I looked at the stack of evidence, the forged lease, the notary's confession, the stolen mail video, and now, the credit card fraud. I had tried to be nice, I had tried to be reasonable, I had tried to solve this with a quiet eviction notice. But you cannot reason with a delusion. You cannot negotiate with a cancer. You have to cut it out. I picked up my phone and called Elias Miller. Change of plans? I said. What is happening? Miller asked. I am not just filing for eviction, I said. I want to file a civil suit for damages. I want to include the identity theft of my parents. I want to bring everything into the light, the fraud, the forgery, the credit cards. Stella, Miller said, his voice cautious. If you do that, you are potentially sending your brother to prison, and you are exposing your mother to liability for conspiracy. You are dropping a nuclear bomb on your family. I looked at the hardware store, where my father was counting pennies to pay for the sins of his son. I don't have a family. Elias, I said. I have a hostage situation, and I am the only one with the clearance to take the shot. Okay, Miller said. I will draft the complaint. We see them in court. See you in court? I said. I started the engine. The chess game was over. I was done moving pawns. It was time to topple the king. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. It was not the mahogany-paneled theater of justice you see in movies. It was a windowless box with beige walls, fluorescent lighting that hummed like a dying insect, and a smell of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Elias Miller. My hands were folded on the table, perfectly still. I had dressed for the occasion in a charcoal gray suit, the kind that says, I am here to do business, not to tell a sob story. On the other side of the aisle, the performance had already begun. Diane was wearing a pastel cardigan and a floral skirt, an outfit designed to evoke the image of a harmless, cookie-baking grandmother. She held a tissue in her hand, dabbing at dry eyes whenever she thought the judge might be looking. Logan sat next to her in a suit that was slightly too shiny, his hair gelled back. He looked like a man who was about to try to sell the bailiff a timeshare. My father, Ron, sat in the gallery behind them. He was hunched over, staring at his shoes. He looked like a ghost haunting his own life. The judge, the Honorable Margaret Vance, was a woman with sharp features and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked like she had heard every lie in the county and had no patience for any of them. We are here on the matter of Baker versus Baker et al., Judge Vance said, shuffling the file. An action for eviction and a counterclaim of rightful tenancy. Yes, Your Honor. Logan's lawyer said. He was a man named Mr. Henderson, a strip mall attorney who looked like he had been hired yesterday. My clients assert that this is an unlawful eviction of family members who have a valid lease agreement. Proceed, the judge said. Henderson stood up. He painted a picture of domestic bliss shattered by a jealous, absent daughter. He talked about how Stella Baker Me had abandoned her parents in their old age, leaving them to fend for themselves while I pursued my high-powered career in Chicago. My client, Logan Baker, Henderson said, gesturing to my brother, stepped in to fill the void. He moved in to care for his elderly parents. He maintains the property. He is the de facto head of the household, and, Your Honor, he has a lease. Henderson walked to the bench and submitted the document. It was the forged lease I had photographed. This document, Henderson continued, signed by the plaintiff, grants Mr. Baker tenancy for 2 years. The plaintiff is now trying to renege on this agreement because of a personal vendetta. Diane nodded vigorously from her seat, sniffling loudly enough to be heard in the back row. Judge Vance looked at the lease. Then she looked at me. Ms. Baker, she said, did you sign this? Elias Miller stood up. Your Honor, not only did my client not sign that document, but we contend that the signature is a clumsy forgery, and we intend to prove that this lease is just the tip of a very large, fraudulent iceberg. Those are strong words, Counselor, the judge said. We have strong evidence, Miller said. He began our presentation. It was not emotional. It was surgical. First, he submitted the deed, the original, recorded deed showing Stella Baker as the sole owner. Then, the mortgage statements, 2 years of payments, every single penny coming from my bank account. Then, the property tax records, the insurance premiums. This is not a family home in the collective sense, Miller said. This is an investment property owned by my client, who graciously allowed her parents and only her parents to live there under a strict occupancy agreement. He submitted the occupancy agreement Ron and Diane had signed. Clause 4, Miller read, no unauthorized residence. Clause 5, no alienation of title. But things changed, Diane blurted out. Order, the judge snapped. Miller didn't miss a beat. Now, regarding the defendant's claim that my client is absent and that Mr. Logan Baker is the man of the house, we would like to submit Exhibit C. Miller handed over a packet of photos. They were the screenshots of the Facebook posts. Logan claiming he bought the house, Diane telling the neighbors I was barely involved, and finally, the photo of the HOA letter addressed to Logan. They have systematically attempted to erase the legal owner from the public record, Miller said. But they did not stop at social media. Miller picked up a flash drive. Your Honor, on the night of October 27th, my client attempted to enter her own property. She found the locks changed. We would like to play a recording made at that time. The judge nodded. Miller pressed play on his laptop. The sound of my voice filled the quiet room. Tinny but clear. Date is October 27th. Time is 7:45. The locks have been changed without my consent. Then, Diane's voice. We had to change it. Logan needs the space. Then, the damning admission. You are not coming in. We packed your things. I watched Diane's face as the recording played. She went pale. She hadn't known I was recording. She looked at Logan, panic flickering in her eyes. Logan just clenched his jaw, staring straight ahead. They locked the owner out, Miller said, pausing the audio. That is an illegal eviction of the landlord by the tenant. But, Your Honor, the defense claims they have a lease. If they had a valid lease, why would they need to change the locks and physically bar the landlord from entering to inspect the property? A tenant with a valid lease has nothing to hide. Unless, Miller said, his voice dropping. They were hiding a crime. He produced the document from the county recorder, the suspended electronic filing. 3 days ago, Miller said, an attempt was made to file a quitclaim deed transferring this property from Stella Baker to Logan Baker. The filing was rejected because the notary seal was flagged. The judge picked up the paper. Her eyebrows shot up. A quitclaim deed. Yes, Your Honor, Miller said. And at the same time, a title insurance alert was triggered. He submitted the email from the insurance company. This suggests that the defendants were not just trying to live in the house, they were trying to steal the house. Mr. Henderson jumped up. Objection. This is speculation. My client knows nothing about a quitclaim deed. That could have been a clerical error or identity theft by a third party. We will get to the identity theft, Miller said coldly. But first, we would like to call Mr. Ronald Baker to the stand. A hush fell over the room. Diane froze. She turned around in her chair and stared at Ron. Her eyes were wide, commanding. She was willing him to stay seated. She was using 40 years of emotional control to try to glue him to that bench. Ron stood up. He walked slowly to the witness stand. He looked frail in his old suit, the one he wore to funerals. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. He sat down. He didn't look at Diane. He looked at me. Mr. Baker, Miller asked gently, who owns the house at 42 Elm Street? My daughter, Stella, Ron said. His voice was quiet but steady. Did Stella buy this house as a gift? No, Ron said. She bought it to save us. We had lost our previous home. We were bankrupt in everything but name. Stella used her savings to put a roof over our heads. She asked for nothing but for us to pay the bills and keep the place up. And the defendant, Logan Baker? Miller asked. Was he part of that agreement? No, Ron said. Stella was very clear. Logan was not to live there. Why? Ron took a breath. Because we have a history of enabling him, and Stella knew it. Ron, Diane shouted from the table. How could you? Mrs. Baker, one more outburst and I will have you removed, Judge Vance warned. Her gavel hovered in the air. Miller continued. Mr. Baker, have you seen the lease agreement presented by the defense? I have, Ron said. Did your daughter sign it? No, Ron said. She was not there that day. Diane, my wife, she brought it home. She told me Logan needed it for proof of residency for a job application. She told me it was just a formality. So it is a forgery. Yes, Ron said. And do you know anything about the quitclaim deed? Ron hesitated. He looked at Logan. Logan was glaring at him, a look of pure, venomous hatred. I know that my wife and son have been very worried about money, Ron said. I know that Logan has debts. I know that they have been talking about how to unlock the value of the house. Mr. Baker, Miller said, why are you testifying today? You are testifying against your wife and son. Ron turned to look at Diane. Tears were streaming down her face, but they were tears of rage, not sorrow. She mouthed the word traitor. Ron looked back at the judge. I have betrayed my daughter for 30 years. Ron said. His voice cracked, but the words were clear. I let her be the one who cleaned up the messes. I let her be the one who was ignored. I let my wife treat her like a bank account instead of a human being. I was scared. I wanted peace, but there is no peace in a lie. Today, I am trying to fix it. The room was silent. I felt a lump in my throat so large I could barely breathe. He had finally said it. He had finally stood up. Thank you. Mr. Baker, Miller said. Mr. Henderson tried to cross-examine Ron, but it was useless. Ron simply repeated the truth. The house was mine. The lease was fake. They had broken the rules. Then, Miller called Logan. Logan walked to the stand with a swagger that was beginning to look brittle. He adjusted his tie. He smiled at the judge. Mr. Baker, Miller said, you claim you are a valid tenant. I am, Logan said. I have a lease. And yet, Miller said, picking up a piece of paper, we have a record of a credit inquiry from First National Bank, an application for a home equity line of credit on the property, dated last week. I don't know about that, Logan lied. Really? Miller said. Because we have a video. He didn't play the video. He just held up a still image printed on photo paper. It showed Logan in his car, by the mailbox, holding the crumpled envelope from the bank. This is an image of you intercepting mail addressed to the property owner, Miller said. Federal mail theft is a serious crime, Mr. Baker. But let's focus on the loan. Why would a tenant apply for a home equity line? Tenants don't have equity. Owners have equity. Logan shifted in his seat. I was just exploring options. For the family. Exploring options to borrow $50,000 against a house you don't own. I was going to pay it back. Logan snapped. The mask slipped. I have a business plan, and the kitchen is a disaster. It needs an upgrade. If we put $50,000 into it, the value of the house goes up by $80,000. It is basic real estate math. I was doing Stella a favor. Ah, Miller said. So you admit you were planning to use the equity to renovate the kitchen. Yes, to help. But you can't use the equity unless you own the house, Miller said softly. So you intended to present yourself as the owner to the bank. Is that correct? Logan froze. He realized the trap too late. He had just admitted that he was acting as the owner, which supported the theory of the forged deed. If he was just a tenant, he would have no reason to think he could get the loan. By admitting he planned the renovation, he admitted he believed he could access the funds. I meant I would ask Stella to sign, Logan stammered. But you didn't ask Stella, Miller said. You forged a deed, and you changed the locks so she couldn't come in and see that you were measuring for new cabinets. I didn't forge anything, Logan shouted. Mom handled the paperwork. She said it was taken care of. Diane gasped. The judge looked from Logan to Diane. The son had just thrown the mother under the bus. That is all, Your Honor, Miller said. Judge Vance adjusted her glasses. She looked at the defense table with an expression of profound distaste. This court has seen enough for today, she said. Your Honor. Henderson tried to intervene. My clients. Your clients, Judge Vance interrupted, her voice sharp as a razor, are treading on extremely thin ice. I am issuing a temporary order immediately restoring exclusive possession of the property to the plaintiff, Stella Baker. Diane let out a wail. Mr. Logan Baker, the judge continued, ignoring her. You are to vacate the premises by 5 p.m. today. You are to remove only your personal clothing and toiletries. You are not to touch any furniture, appliances, or documents. Law enforcement will be present to supervise your departure. Regarding the allegations of fraud and forgery, the judge said, looking at the documents Miller had submitted, I am ordering the notary, Linda Morsky, to appear before this court with her official journal within 48 hours. If these documents are proven to be fraudulent, I will be referring this entire matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. She banged the gavel. We will reconvene on Friday for the final judgment. Court is adjourned. But where will I go? Logan shouted. I have nowhere to go. That, Judge Vance said, standing up, is something you should have calculated before you tried to steal your sister's house. I stood up. I looked at Diane. She was slumped in her chair, weeping, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Logan, reaching out for his hand. Logan pulled his hand away. He was looking at his phone, probably already trying to find a friend he hadn't scammed yet to crash with. Ron walked past them. He didn't stop. He came up to me. "I am sorry, Stella," he said. "I know, Dad," I said. "Let's go get your bag. You are coming with me." We walked out of the courtroom together. Behind us, the sound of Diane's accusations against Ron echoed off the beige walls. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what she was saying. I had the law. I had the truth. And in 48 hours, I would have the final signature that mattered. Friday morning arrived with the heavy gray permanence of a prison door slamming shut. The courtroom felt different this time. The air was thinner. The pretense of a family misunderstanding had evaporated, leaving only the cold, hard machinery of the law. I sat next to Elias Miller. My hands were steady. I had spent the night reviewing the timeline, memorizing every date, every timestamp, every lie. I was not nervous. I was done being nervous. I was in execution mode. On the other side of the aisle, the tableau had shifted. Diane was no longer wearing her confident, matriarchal mask. She looked frantic. She was clutching a piece of folded notebook paper in her hands, as if it were a holy relic. Logan was sitting as far away from her as the bench would allow, his leg bouncing up and down in a rhythm of pure, unadulterated panic. My father, Ron, sat in the gallery again, but this time, he had his suitcase next to him. He had made his choice. Judge Vance swept into the room, her black robe billowing. She did not look at the gallery. She looked at the evidence files stacked high on her bench. "We are back on the record," Judge Vance said. "We are here to conclude the matter of the property at 42 Elm Street. Does the defense have any final remarks before I issue my ruling?" Mr. Henderson, the strip mall lawyer, stood up. He looked tired. He knew he was fighting a losing battle, but he had to go through the motions. "Your Honor," Henderson said, "my client, Mrs. Diane Baker, would like to read a brief statement. She believes this is a matter of the heart, not just the law. This is a property dispute, Counselor," Judge Vance said, "but I will allow 2 minutes. Make it brief." Diane stood up. Her hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. She cleared her throat. She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears that I knew were real, but they were tears for herself, not for me. "I wrote this for my daughter," Diane began, her voice trembling. "Stella, I know you are angry. I know we made mistakes with the paperwork, but everything I did for the family. A mother's love does not follow rules. A mother's love is about making sure her children are safe. Logan needed a home. You have so much. Stella, you have always been the strong one. I just wanted to share the blessings. Please, don't destroy us over a house. Don't be cold. Remember who raised you." She looked at the judge, wiping her eyes. "We are a family, Your Honor. We shouldn't be here." The room was silent. For a second, I felt the old pull, the childhood conditioning that told me to fix it, to smooth it over, to apologize for being difficult. Then I looked at the table where the evidence lay, the forged lease, the credit card bills in my father's name, the stolen mail. "Thank you, Mrs. Baker," Judge Vance said. Her voice was not unkind, but it was firm. "You may sit down." "Your Honor," Elias Miller stood up. "We appreciate the sentiment. However, the plaintiff would like to submit one final piece of evidence to address the claim that this was a benevolent misunderstanding rooted in love." Miller walked to the bench. He handed over a single sheet of paper. "This is a printout of an email from the title insurance company," Miller said. "It is dated October 25th, 2 days before my client was locked out of her home." The judge took the paper. "Read the highlighted section, please," Miller requested. Judge Vance adjusted her glasses. "Dear Mr. Logan Baker, per your telephone inquiry regarding the removal of Stella Baker from the deed, be advised that a quitclaim deed requires the notarized signature of the grantor. Any attempt to file such a document without said signature is a felony fraud. We have placed a preliminary fraud alert on this parcel per your conversation." Miller turned to the courtroom. "They knew," Miller said, his voice ringing off the walls. "They were warned. They were told explicitly by a title officer that what they were doing was illegal, and yet, 48 hours later, they changed the locks. They forged the signature. They submitted the document anyway. This was not a mother's love, Your Honor. This was a calculated, predatory attempt to seize an asset." Diane gasped. She looked at Logan. "You called the title company." Logan's face went white. He had never told her that part. He had told her it was easy. "Mr. Logan Baker," Judge Vance said, her eyes narrowing. Is this true? Logan stood up. He looked at the judge. He looked at me. Then he looked at his mother. The walls were closing in, and a rat will always bite the nearest hand to escape the trap. She told me to, Logan shouted. He pointed a shaking finger at Diane. It was her idea. She said Stella would never know. She said Stella never checks the mail. She told me to call and see if there was a loophole. I didn't want to do it. She pushed me. Logan, Diane shrieked. It was a sound of pure betrayal. The sound of a woman watching her idol smash himself into pieces. I did it for you. I did everything for you. You made me forge it, Logan yelled back, his face red and ugly. You gave me the pen. You said you would cover for me. Order. Judge Vance banged the gavel. Order in this court. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The golden child had just publicly sacrificed his creator to save his own skin. Judge Vance looked at them with an expression of profound disgust. I have heard enough, she said. The narrative of a family misunderstanding is officially dead. What we have here is a conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. She opened the file and began to write, her pen scratching loudly against the paper. The court rules in favor of the plaintiff, Stella Baker, Judge Vance announced. The lease agreement presented by the defense is declared void ab initio as a forgery. The defendants, Logan Baker and Diane Baker, are in violation of the occupancy agreement. She looked up. I am issuing an immediate writ of possession to Stella Baker, Mr. Logan Baker. You are to vacate the property immediately. You are not to return. Mrs. Diane Baker. Your right to occupy the premises is terminated due to breach of contract and malicious activity against the owner. You can't do this, Diane wailed. It is my home. It is not your home, Judge Vance said. It is the plaintiff's house. You were a guest who tried to steal the furniture. The order stands. The gavel came down. It was the final nail. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. Diane was sobbing, loud, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Logan was already on his phone, furiously texting, ignoring his mother completely. I walked out into the hallway. The air felt cleaner here. Diane came bursting out of the doors a moment later, followed by Henderson. She saw me standing by the water fountain. You are heartless, she screamed. She lunged toward me, but Henderson held her back. You are cold-blooded, Stella. How can you do this to your own brother? To me, I gave you life. You gave me life, I said calmly, and then you tried to steal the life I built for myself. I have no daughter, she spat. You are dead to me. I have been dead to you for a long time. Mom, I said. I was just a ghost who paid the bills. Now the ghost is gone. Logan came out next. He saw me. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked desperate. The reality of homelessness was setting in. Stella, he said. He put on his best charming smile, but it looked like a crack in a windshield. Look, things got heated in there, but seriously, I have nowhere to go. My credit is shot. I can't rent a place. Just give me 30 days. Just 30 days to figure it out. I will sleep in the basement. I won't make a sound. I looked at him. I looked at the brother who had mocked my job, stolen my mail, and tried to mortgage my future to renovate a kitchen he didn't own. I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out a thick envelope. This, I said, holding it up, is a completed police report. It contains the affidavit from the notary, the video of you stealing the mail, and the email from the title company proving premeditated fraud. Logan stared at the envelope. His Adam's apple bobbed. I have a choice to make, I said. I can walk over to the police station right now and file this. If I do, you will be arrested for felony forgery and mail theft before dinner time. You will go to prison. Logan, not for a weekend, for years. Stella, don't, he whispered. Or, I said, you can get in your car. You can drive away. You can never come back to Cedar Hollow. You can never ask me for $1 again. If you disappear, this envelope stays in my drawer. If you stay, or if you ever try to contact me or Dad for money again, I file it. You are bluffing, he said. I am a risk analyst. Logan, I said. I don't bluff. I calculate odds. The odds of you surviving prison are low. The odds of me filing this are 100% if you are not off my property in 1 hour. He looked at the envelope. He looked at my eyes. He saw the truth. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't look at his mother. He turned around and ran toward the exit. Ron came out last. He was carrying his suitcase. He looked at Diane, who was leaning against the wall, weeping into her hands. He walked over to me. He is gone, Ron asked. He is gone, I said. And your mother? Ron asked. Where will she go? Stella. She has no money. Her credit is ruined because of the cards Logan opened. I can't be with her anymore. I am done, but I can't let her sleep on a park bench. I can't have that on my conscience. I looked at Diane. She looked small and pathetic. A queen without a kingdom. Abandoned by the prince she had destroyed her family to serve. I won't let her live in the house, I said. That door is closed forever. I know, Ron said. I took out my checkbook. I wrote a check for $2,000. There is an extended stay motel on the highway, I said. This covers 1 month. It is enough time for her to call her sister, or find a job, or figure out her next move. But that is it, Dad. 1 month. After that, she is on her own. Ron took the check. His hands were shaking. Thank you, Stella. You are better than we deserve. No, I said. I am just settling the final account. Ron walked over to Diane. He handed her the check. He said something to her, low and quiet. She looked up at him, shocked. She reached for his arm, but he stepped back. He turned and walked away, coming to stand beside me. Ready, Dad? I asked. Ready, he said. We left her there in the hallway of the courthouse. I didn't look back. 2 hours later, I stood on the porch of the house in Cedar Hollow. The afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the lawn. The locksmith was just finishing up. All set. Ms. Baker, the locksmith said, handing me a new set of keys. These are high security. No one is picking these. Thank you, I said. I watched his van drive away. The street was quiet. Mrs. Higgins was walking her dog across the street. She stopped and looked at me. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just stood there, claiming my space. I walked inside. The house was silent. The furniture Logan had bought was still there. I would sell it to pay for the legal fees. The studio was empty. The energy of the house had changed. The frantic, desperate grasping of my family was gone. I walked into the kitchen. I saw the table where I had sat and calculated their debts. I saw the counter where Diane had hidden the mail. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I expected to feel lonely. I expected to feel the crushing weight of the loss. I had lost my mother. I had lost my brother. I had broken the unit. But I didn't feel lonely. I felt light. I realized that I hadn't lost a family today. I had lost a parasite. I had lost a delusion. I had stopped feeding a dynamic that was designed to consume me. I had cut away the rot, and for the first time in years, the healthy tissue underneath could breathe. My father was safe in my car, waiting to start a quiet, honest life in a small apartment I would help him find in Chicago. The house was mine. The equity was safe. My future was my own. I walked to the front door. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut. I listened to the sound of the latch clicking into place. I slid the new key into the lock. It turned smoothly, silently, with a perfect mechanical precision. It was the sound of a problem solved. It was the sound of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. I locked the door. I put the key in my pocket. Some people might call what I did revenge. They might say I was cruel to kick my own mother out, to threaten my brother with prison, but I don't call it revenge. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is messy. This was just an audit. I looked at the house one last time. I had paid for it with money. Then I had paid for it with patience. And finally, I had paid for it with the death of my childhood hope. But it was paid for. I just gave truth its proper name, I whispered to the empty street. And the truth finally has a key. Thank you so much for listening to Stella's story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop a comment below with your city or country. Let's see how far this story travels. If you enjoyed this tale of justice served, please hit that like button. Subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who need a little victory in their day. See you in the next story.